The rain was relentless that night, drumming on the roof of Daniel's small workshop. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag and stared at the half-fixed engine before him. The world had taken a lot from him, his wife, his savings, his peace. But he still had his tools, his will, and a small apartment where loneliness echoed louder than any engine roar. He was closing up when he heard it, a faint cry coming from outside. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then another sound followed, two voices, trembling, young, and scared. Daniel stepped out, the cold rain hitting his face, and saw them, two little girls sitting by the curb, drenched, holding each other tight. They couldn't have been older than 6. Their clothes were soaked, their hair plastered to their faces. One of them clutched a small stuffed bunny, the other had nothing but fear in her eyes. "Hey, hey," Daniel said gently, kneeling down. "Where's your mom?" The girls looked at each other before one whispered, "She left." That word hit Daniel like a punch. He swallowed hard. "Left where?" he asked softly. "She said she's not coming back," the other added, her voice barely audible. Daniel hesitated. He was a stranger, a single man, a mechanic, but something inside him, something deeply human, told him he couldn't just walk away. "Come on," he said, holding out his hand. "Let's get you warm." Inside his small apartment, the girls shivered as he found them towels and a blanket. He made hot cocoa, the only sweet thing he had left, and watched as they sipped it like it was gold. "What are your names?" he asked. "Lila," said the first. "And I'm Lucy," said the second. "Twins." Same eyes, same sadness. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He watched them curled up on the couch, hugging each other in their sleep. He thought about calling child services, the right thing to do, but something in him rebelled. The system had taken his own little boy years ago after his wife's death. He wasn't going to let that happen again. Days turned into weeks. He fixed cars during the day and read bedtime stories at night. Lila and Lucy began to smile again. They drew pictures for him, cars with hearts, houses with sunshine, and always 3 people. His neighbors started noticing the laughter that filled his apartment. One of them, an old lady, said, "Daniel, you look alive again." He smiled, realizing it was true. For the first time in years, he had a reason to rush home. But then, one morning, the past came knocking. A woman in a fancy coat arrived, the twin stepmother. She looked ashamed, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to leave them," she said. "I just couldn't handle it." Daniel stood there, speechless. The girls clung to him, terrified she'd take them away. The woman saw their fear and stepped back. "They're better off with you," she whispered. "You have something I never did, a heart." Then she turned and walked away. That day, Daniel realized he'd been given something priceless. Not a gift, not a burden, but a purpose. He officially adopted Lila and Lucy months later, signing the papers with trembling hands. When the judge said, "Congratulations, Dad," he almost cried. Life wasn't perfect. Money was tight, and raising 2 curious 6-year-olds meant endless messes and noise. But Daniel loved every bit of it, the morning giggles, the crayon drawings on the fridge, the tiny hands that always reached for his. Years passed. The girls grew, and so did his pride. They excelled in school, and every time one of them won an award, they'd run to him first. "We did it, Daddy," they'd shout, wrapping him in hugs. He'd smile, eyes wet, thinking of the night he found them in the rain. When they turned 12, they organized a surprise for him. In the shop where he worked, they hung a banner, "To the best dad who fixed more than cars, he fixed our hearts." Daniel broke down then. Tough men cry too. The world finally noticed the small mechanic who had become a hero without knowing it. A journalist wrote their story, and it went viral. People all over the country sent letters, donations, and messages saying how one man's kindness changed everything. But Daniel didn't do it for fame. He did it because something broken had found something lost, and together they made each other whole. On their graduation day, Lila and Lucy walked the stage together. Daniel sat in the front row, his old jacket pressed and his smile wide. When they called their names, they didn't go to the principal, they ran straight to him. "This is for you, Dad," Lucy said, handing him their diplomas. That night, as the three of them watched the sunset from their porch, Lucy asked, "Dad, do you ever regret that night?" He smiled. "If I had to live all over again," he said, "I'd still stop in the rain." Lila rested her head on his shoulder. "You saved us," she whispered. He looked at her and said softly, "No, girls. You saved me." And as the last light faded, the laughter of a man and his two daughters filled the air, proof that miracles don't always come from heaven. Sometimes, they come from a rain-soaked street and a man who simply refused to walk away. Time moved like a quiet river, and Daniel often found himself standing at the edge of it, watching how quickly it all flowed by. Lila and Lucy were now teenagers, taller, louder, and full of life. Their laughter filled every corner of the house, the same house that once echoed with silence and oil-scented loneliness. Now, there were piano notes, study books, and hair ties scattered everywhere, signs of life he'd once thought he'd never have again. But being a single father to two teenage girls wasn't always easy. There were days when the arguments were louder than the music, when doors slammed, and when Daniel sat outside on the porch, wondering if he was doing it right. Yet, even on the worst days, they always came back to him, with apologies, with hugs, with that same sparkle in their eyes that reminded him why he'd never given up. One evening, Lucy came home crying. Someone at school had mocked her for not having a real dad. Daniel's heart broke, but before he could say anything, Lila stepped in front of him and said fiercely, "We have the best dad. He's realer than anyone I know." It was in that moment that Daniel realized love had erased every trace of bloodline. As years went on, Daniel's health began to waver. His back ached more, his hands trembled slightly when he worked on engines. The twins noticed it before he did. "Dad, you shouldn't be under those cars anymore," Lucy said one night, her voice filled with concern. He laughed softly. "What else am I good at, sweetheart?" "At being our hero," she answered, and he couldn't hold back his tears. When they turned 18, Lila and Lucy made a promise. They'd build something that honored the man who gave them everything. While Daniel slept, they worked on plans, saving money from part-time jobs, sketching designs late into the night. They wanted to open a small cafe next to the workshop, a place called Miracle.